Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today we have the release of two new cards in Sentry and Darkhaw. And both of these cards are gonna be a little bit difficult to build around. I think both have some potential in the metagame, and I think they'll be okay overall. But for this first video, I'm going to be covering Sentry, some deck building ideas, and my overall thoughts on the card and if it's going to be worth spending 6,000 tokens on. There will be a follow-up video later today covering Darkhaw as well. And so if you're interested in that card, make sure that you stick around, make sure that you're subscribed or that you just check back because that one will be uploaded shortly. Sentry is a 4-cost, 8-power card that has the ability this cannot be played in the right location and has the honorable ability of adding -8 power void to the right location. And so this is going to be kind of restrictive. If that lane is capped out, you should be able to play this one without that negative downside. But at 4 cost, 8 power, if you were just flooding the board and using this as a base card, then you're losing quite a bit of value. And you could do something that's easier and more consistent to trigger in, like a Jessica Jones, a Drax, or a Crossbones are all 4 cost that can be or will likely be 8 power if used in the right way. And they don't have the big drawback. And so how are we going to be able to build around Sentry? I think there are going to be a couple of ways to do that, but each one seems to require a pretty deep collection. I don't think this is going to be a card that's going to be easy to be plugged in and played like Shuri. Shuri can be played in a vast array of decks. Sentry is going to be a little bit more restrictive because it has a very niche use. And that niche use is going to be used in combination with a Viper. So Viper has the on-reveal ability, your opponent gains control of one of your other cards at this location. And so if on turn 4, you can guarantee that your far right lane is empty, you can guarantee that you're going to send them a negative, so it's going to be a Hobgoblin that you're sending their way. And if you have both Sentry and Viper that you utilize, that's going to be a 19 power board presence for 8 cost, which is huge if you can pull that off. It's a 2-card combo, and it could be easily countered by things like Cosmo, or they could even destroy it at the end of the game with a destroyer, and then you lose 8 of that value, and it's inherently a little bit risky to run this. And so let's go ahead and jump into my top 3 deck recommendations to try out with this card to get a feel for his ability and what kind of shell he would be good in. So the first deck that I'm going to be trying out is a Hazmat, Luke Cage, Bast deck, and as I said, this is probably going to require a pretty deep collection to be able to utilize him effectively. And so with this list, we're going to be able to push some of our early power. We can use Bast in combination with our Adam Warlock so that we can draw in a couple of extra cards and more reliably trigger our Sentry. The 2 empty slots are going to be Absorbing Man and then, of course, the new card in Sentry. And Absorbing Man can have multiple targets in this list. You could either use it to re-trigger your Hazmat at the end of the game. You could use it to re-trigger Debris. If you don't end up drawing into your Sentry, you could use the Debris path to end up clogging up the opponent's board. You can use Polaris to pull their cards over. I think this is going to be an okay shell. And then at the end of the game, you can use your Hazmat and Luke Cage, maybe your Hazmat and your Absorbing Man to double trigger your Hazmat with Luke Cage already on the board. That way they get a negative impact and you retain your power value. But I think this one, it's going to be tough. I don't think this is going to be an incredibly consistent list. I think when it works, it'll work pretty well. I think it'll be very fun, but I think it will see some challenges. And then the second list that I have is a junk deck. It is a all-in Debris junk deck, and it has 3 slots that I currently don't have on this account. The first one being Titania, the second one being Absorbing Man, and then the third one being the unreleased Sentry as of the recording of this video. So otherwise, this is very similar to the Titania Control deck that I ran recently, where Absorbing Man has a lot of really good cards to copy their honorable ability for, whether that be a Green Goblin so that he sends to their side of the board and he clogs up their board, whether it be a Polaris to pull an additional card over and end up capping out those locations, whether it be a Debris to really flood the board, a Spider-Man to lock them out of turn 4 and 5, or just turn 5 into turn 6. And then we added the addition of Black Widow. Black Widow is going to start clogging up their board even more. So with the previous build, we leaned more towards Storm, and on this one, we're going to lean more towards filling up their side of the board with junk. And so if we don't draw into both Sentry and Viper, that is okay. We have multiple play lines that we can lean in on to find our win conditions. And then if we draw into Void, but we don't have our Viper, we can play Void, and then we can use Carnage to destroy some Debris rocks, to destroy the hood that's over there, to be able to mitigate that downside from the card. It's not going to be the full 8 cost, 19 power swing, but it will help us mitigate some of that damage. And we'd be able to use Viper, and we'd be able to use Sentry on the very last turn, whereas something like Jessica Jones, you're not able to do that as freely. So we could always do Sentry plus Carnage on the last turn for our 6 power. If we've locked out that Spider-Man lane, then that's going to give us a little bit of extra power in the far right lane. Plus, we can use Sentry to push ourselves over in whatever lane we played Spider-Man in to make sure that we find our win condition there as well. I think this one has a pretty decent level of opportunity. Just from the feel from me playing that control deck with Titania previously, it was already very, very strong. And now if you have that additional win condition or that additional big powerful play in sending over a -8 power card onto their side of the board with your Viper, that elevates things quite a bit. And something that I think is going to be a pretty cool interaction is doing Viper and Polaris on turn 5 after dropping a turn 4 Sentry. That way you can send them the -8 Void, you can pull one additional card over into that lane with Polaris to help cap it out. If they've played 1 or 2 cards in that location, then all of a sudden they can't play anything else. They have a really low power total in that lane, and you can just start looking for your win condition in that alternative lane as well. So this list runs Chavez. I don't know that that is going to be the optimal slot, but I wanted to have a way to draw into our other powerful plays and our kind of deck build around more consistently. And it gives us a pretty decent last turn drop if we don't have a better play line. And then the last one that I have, we all know that I've ran KM Best's Dino Control deck quite a bit. And it's been pretty consistent for the most part. It does struggle in the Leech meta, but otherwise it is very, very strong. And I think this might be an okay shell for a potential win condition. It gives you another ideal turn 4 drop in your Sentry, and then if you have Viper, you can send that across the board. It lets you set up an easier Daredevil lockdown. You can redirect their cards. I think Void plus Viper is an okay shell. I don't know that that is going to be the most optimal shell, but I do think you'll find a couple of games where you can find that win condition using the Sentry and Viper to clog up their board, send them negative powerful things, and then you drop your leader on the last turn, you drop an arrow on the last turn to redirect their cards and find your win condition. Now, a cool play with this one, whereas before on turn 5, we want to drop a Viper and a Polaris, this one is going to allow us to do a Viper into a Cosmo on turn 5. And so if we send them the -8 Void in that right lane with Viper and then follow that up on that same turn with Cosmo, they have no chance. If we have initiative, they have no opportunity to destroy or send the Void back or counter it in any way, shape, or form. They're just stuck with that -8 power unit on their side of the board. And so I think it's going to be a pretty decent play line. This will require some testing. I don't know if this is going to be the best shell. And overall, Sentry just feels like he might be a little bit lackluster, especially for 6,000 tokens. I think once more people have him, once we have a few other resources as well, so something like a Zabu is going to allow him to start kind of elevating that power push or that power potential. But as of right now, I think he will see some play, but I don't think he's as polarizing as something like a Shuri or a Galactus or a Null in what he can do. I think he will help elevate junk decks a little bit, but there's still the inherent risk of if the opponent starts dropping their Cosmo into the far right lane, because they've seen so many Sentries, then all of a sudden you're stuck with that card, you have no way to counter around it, and you wouldn't be able to drop your Sentry in that location. Now, with a Cosmo, you could drop your Sentry behind the Cosmo, but again, that goes back to just a 4 cost, 8 power play, which we have several alternatives to be able to find that power level. But those are my top 3 deck recommendations to try out with Sentry for today. If you end up pulling or buying Sentry and you have a different shell that you try him in, definitely let me know. I'm going to keep an eye out. I'm going to try to purchase both Darkhawk and Sentry, and so I'm going to be doing gameplay footage for both, so definitely stick around for that. But I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. And as always, this has been TLSG. Later, guys.